When a narcissist begs, the illusion of humility. You would never expect a narcissist to beg, would you? Psychologists remind us that narcissism is built on grandiosity, entitlement, and a false sense of superiority. These individuals project themselves as godlike, untouchable, invincible, immune to ordinary human fragility. Mercy, in their world, is not something they offer or request. It's something they demand as a right. Their lives are often defined by crushing the hearts of those who care for them, mocking vulnerability, and discarding humility as if it were weakness. But here lies the paradox psychologists often emphasize. Even the most arrogant narcissist is not free from the limits of reality. There are rare, shattering moments when their carefully constructed mask cracks. In those moments, when the narcissist suddenly confronts mortality, abandonment, or exposure, even they can fall to their knees and beg for mercy. Yet make no mistake, as clinical psychologists warn, their cries are not born of genuine guilt or repentance. Instead, they emerge from fear, desperation, and the primal instinct of survival. What looks like surrender is often just another form of manipulation, a last-ditch attempt to maintain control. That's why it is vital to understand the psychology behind these rare occasions. Once you do, you'll never mistake their begging for transformation. You'll see it clearly. Another performance, another strategy, another illusion. The first time they beg, when death knocks. Psychologists note that narcissists live with a denial of vulnerability. They cling to the fantasy of invincibility, believing illness, frailty, or death applies to others, never themselves. But when a terminal diagnosis or the slow march of aging strips them bare, the facade collapses. This is often when their begging begins. I witnessed this firsthand in my grandfather's final days. His life had been marked by coldness, calculated cruelty, psychopathic detachment, and a refusal to show mercy. Yet, when death stood in front of him, everything shifted. Suddenly, he became hyper-religious, begging every visitor for prayers, sighing heavily, and pleading for mercy. The man who once mocked compassion now clung to it desperately. Psychologists explain this shift as regression, a defense mechanism where, under extreme stress, a person reverts to a more childlike state. In this case, the narcissist becomes almost infantile, helpless, and terrified. It is not a conscious choice but a collapse of the grandiose self. I saw the same with my father. Each time illness struck, the arrogance vanished. In its place was a fragile, almost childlike man, whispering lines like, "Now you are my only support. First, I trust in God, then in you." In those moments, psychologists would say, he was experiencing narcissistic injury, the deep psychic wound of realizing he was not invincible. It triggered a desperate need for care and attention, which he disguised as humility but was truly a survival instinct. But here is the cruel truth survivors must hold on to. This begging is temporary. It arises out of helplessness, not transformation. Psychologists stress that unless a narcissist genuinely confronts and works through their disorder, a rarity, these moments fade as quickly as they appear. When health returns, so does the cruelty. They erase the memory of ever needing you, because to remember would shatter their fragile self-image. For victims, this cycle is emotionally devastating. Each time the narcissist shows weakness, hope awakens. Maybe they've changed. Maybe they've found their heart. But psychologists caution, do not confuse desperation with redemption. The begging is not proof of healing, it is proof of fear. The best strategy for the victim is to remain compassionate without surrendering boundaries. Offer practical help if you choose, but protect your heart. Because the moment strength returns, they will often rewrite history and reclaim their mask of superiority. The illusion of untouchability and the descent into begging. Psychologists often warn that when narcissists feel threatened, they rarely soften. Instead, many become even more destructive, as if trying to prove to themselves and everyone around them that nothing can pierce their armor. This is the psychology of overcompensation. When reality threatens their fragile self-image, they lash out, amplifying cruelty to silence the voice of vulnerability inside them. Yet, even this defense has limits. When death looms, when a terminal diagnosis strips them of the illusion of control. This is when their begging becomes most desperate. Why? As psychologists explain, narcissists beg not out of true remorse, but because they seek absolution without accountability. They want a last-minute pardon, a spiritual loophole, a way to escape the consequences of a lifetime spent exploiting others. Their pleas often echo with religious or moral undertones. Pray for me. Forgive me. Don't abandon me. But according to trauma therapists, these words are not signs of transformation. They are a final survival strategy, born of terror rather than empathy. For victims, the critical strategy is to see through the illusion. Compassion is human, but boundaries are essential. Offer kindness if you wish, but do not confuse fear of death with repentance. When wealth and status collapse. For narcissists, money, status, and influence are not mere possessions. Psychologists emphasize that these external symbols form the core of their identity. Wealth is not just currency, it is proof of superiority. Status is not recognition, it is survival fuel. Their entire sense of self rests upon the illusion of control and the appearance of godlike power. But life has a way of humbling even the proudest. A business collapse, a market crash, a lawsuit, or even illness that drains their resources. Suddenly, the foundation of their identity crumbles. I have seen narcissists who once ridiculed others now crawling back to the very people they once discarded. They beg for mercy not because of love or reconnect ion, but because the victim represents stability. Psychologists note that in times of collapse, narcissists often reframe themselves as victims of fate, spinning tales of betrayal, injustice, or cosmic cruelty. This is their victim complex, a defense mechanism to deflect responsibility and manipulate sympathy. And yes, they will cry real tears, but those tears are for the empire they lost, not for the people they harmed. When they say, "Take me back, I'll change, save me," it is not your heart they want, it is your utility. They see you as a tool, a rescuer, the one who might rebuild what they cannot. Psychologists caution survivors to recognize this pattern for what it is. Instrumental love, love that is conditional and transactional. The safest strategy is to resist the pull of pity, to remember that your worth is not in being their safety net, but in reclaiming your own life. Think of it, if you will, as a form of karmic punishment. Life sometimes allows narcissists to fly higher than most, only so their fall will be more catastrophic. And it is in that crash, stripped of money, stripped of titles, that you will hear them beg. But remember this, their begging is not repentance. It is survival, the begging of a shattered mask. He toyed with her emotions as if they were nothing more than a football to be kicked around for amusement. But when she finally exposed him, revealing his double life, his lies, his cruelty, what happened? The grandiose mask cracked. Psychologists call this a narcissistic collapse. The moment the false self disintegrates under the weight of undeniable truth. The same man who once ridiculed her now fell to his knees. He offered money, whispered promises, bargained for silence, begging her not to say more. And psychologists remind us, this was never about her pain, never about remorse. It was about image protection. Narcissists can survive losing your love, but they cannot endure losing face. Public humiliation is their greatest terror, because exposure annihilates the carefully constructed persona they've lived behind. To them, this exposure feels like a kind of death, the death of their false self. And in that death, they beg. Not for reconciliation, not for healing, but for mercy from the one holding the evidence, the one holding the power to destroy their image. For victims, this can be an intoxicating moment. Psychologists warn that seeing a narcissist beg can stir dangerous empathy. Maybe they finally understand. Maybe I've reached their heart. But the truth is far darker. Their begging is not an awakening, it's panic-driven survival mode. The strategy here is to resist the pull of their theatrics and to recognize the performance for what it is. A desperate attempt to restore control, not an invitation to true repair. The fourth time, when abandonment leaves them alone. Psychologists describe narcissists as addicted to supply, the endless stream of attention, admiration, love, or even hatred. Any reaction, positive or negative, feeds them. Like a predator or parasite, they depend on others for emotional oxygen. But when everyone abandons them, when they are left in total isolation with no one left to feed their ego, that's when the begging begins. Loneliness, psychologists explain, is not just uncomfortable for a narcissist, it is suffocating. It forces them to confront the inner void they've spent their entire lives running from. That hollow emptiness, the absence of a true self, feels unbearable. I've seen narcissists who once acted untouchable crumble when abandoned fully. They call, they text, they beg. Some even step into therapy, not out of a desire to change, but out of desperation for reconnect ion. Why? Because they missed the supply you once gave them. To a narcissist, being ignored or cut off, psychologists call this narcissistic starvation, feels worse than death. So they plead, please don't leave me. I'll never hurt you again. I'll do anything to change. I can't live without you. But psychologists emphasize, these words are not love. They are hunger, the desperate cries of a starving ego, not the tender voice of a healed heart. And here lies the most painful cycle. If you take them back, the begging soon mutates. Weakness transforms into rage, desperation into aggression more violent than before. The loneliness-driven plea was never about you. It was about re-establishing control. And once control is restored, the abuse resumes. Psychologists advise survivors that the only real way to protect yourself here is no contact or strict boundaries. To stay free, you must see their begging not as love but as bait. The final reflection. So these are the only 4 times a narcissist will ever beg for mercy. When death approaches, when wealth and power collapse, when exposure destroys their image, and when abandonment leaves them starved of supply. Each plea may look different, each may sound convincing, but psychologists agree on one truth: it is not repentance. It is survival disguised as surrender. And now, I want to ask you, have you seen them beg? Have they come crawling back to you with tears, promises, or bargains? Share your experience in the comments below, because your story may be the very lifeline someone else needs. Until next time, thank you for listening. Keep your boundaries strong, protect your peace, and as always, let the healing begin.